الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Welcome anyone and everyone to another webinar hosted by Ihsan Foundation for West Africa. Please stop by the website ihsanfoundation.org. Learn about the work that has been ongoing since 1996, mashallah. There are a number of projects that range from initiatives supporting people with their education, from children to adults. We build schools, we support orphans, we're building a hospital in Sierra Leone. So, mashallah, there are a number of projects that are ongoing. Please, first and foremost, make dua for the work that's happening, and then please visit the website and support any and all of the projects that pull on your heartstrings that you find to be meaningful. In terms of I look like a ghost. SubhanAllah. In terms of our esteemed guest for today, Dr. Nancy Khalil. She's an assistant professor in American culture and core faculty in the program on Arab and Muslim American Studies at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. Her current research interests include U.S. imams, Muslims and higher education, Muslim seminaries, racialization, and advertising. Her forthcoming book project with Stanford University Press is an ethnography on bureaucracy and religion in the U.S. through a study of who recognizes U.S. imams and how they do so. Dr. Khalil received a master's in higher education administration and student development from Boston College, followed by a PhD in anthropology from Harvard University. Afterwards, she completed a postdoctoral fellowship at Yale University's Center for Race in, how do I say this, indigeneity?
Excellent.
I'm trying. Um, and transnational migration, as well as the collegiate postdoctoral fellowship at the University of Michigan. She previously worked as a Muslim chaplain at, okay, how do you say, Wellesley?
Wellesley, yeah. Wellesley College.
Wellesley, okay, Wellesley College. Okay, mashallah. Co-founded the Muslim Justice League and served on the board of trustees for the Islamic Relief USA. She currently serves on the board for Pillars Foundation. I'll go ahead and hand over the mic to her as a very basic format for anyone tuning in. Dr. Nancy is going to offer a talk, inshallah, first, and then uninterrupted, and then the second main portion would be dialogue. If anyone tuning in has any comments or questions, feel free to mention them in the chat here on Zoom. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and hand over the mic to Dr. Nancy.
جزاكم الله كل خير. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد أشرف المرسلين. Thank you so much for that gracious introduction. And also, I want to start by just thanking Ihsan for West Africa. Our relief organizations have a special place in my heart because of the work that they do. And I pray for all of them to do their work with pure intentions. And I love the name of this organization, Ihsan, which should be the root of all that we do. So thank you for all of that. I chose the topic seeking knowledge today in part because it's what I do for a living, and I wanted to think about it more deeply. Um, I'm a professor, as our brother Bilal noted in his introduction, and as a professor, I believe that my job is to continuously pursue knowledge and continuously share the knowledge that I have. And defining what is knowledge and defining how to pursue it, especially in the current climate that we're in the United States, where we've been witnessing atrocities and a genocide in Palestine occurring. We're seeing more recently aggressive attack on education around the country, criminalizing different forms of speech and protest, um, and people shifting language, changing the way they describe the work that they do, being prohibited from teaching certain things. It's a very kind of hot time in academia and to be working as a professor. And when things get really heated, my first instinct is to retreat to my faith and look to it as a source of guidance for to to find stability in the moment and how to handle the moment. So that's why I chose this topic. I wanted to start by establishing like why do we seek knowledge in Islam, and it's a pretty clear mandate. The Prophet ﷺ taught us that seeking knowledge is an obligation upon every Muslim. So this is just indisputable. It's something we all need to do. And I recognize that as a college professor, I have a little bit of a privilege in that that is my mandated full-time occupation. People who work in other fields might not so easily identify how their work connects to seeking knowledge, but it's all there. And we'll talk a bit about that. Um, but I wanted to start with this beautiful narration from Kathir ibn Qais. He was sitting with Abu Darda in a mosque in Dimashq, and a man came and he said to him, Abu Darda, I have come to you from the town of the Messenger of Allah salam, for a tradition that I've heard you relate to the Messenger salam, and I've come for no other purpose. And he told him, I heard the Messenger of Allah sallallahu wasallam say, if anyone travels on a road in search of knowledge, Allah will cause him to travel on one of the roads of paradise. The angels will lower their wings in their great pleasure with one who seeks knowledge. The inhabitants of the heavens and the earth and the fish in the deep waters will ask forgiveness for that learned man. The superiority of the learned man over the devout is like that of the moon on the night when it is full over the rest of the stars. The learned are the heirs of the prophets, peace be upon them, and the prophets leave back neither a dinar nor a dirham. They leave only knowledge, and he who takes from that knowledge has taken an abundant portion. So this hadith, I find it so powerful and beautiful because it's so aesthetic. Like you can visually imagine like an angel dipping their wing. You can imagine all of the inhabitants of the heavens and the earth and the fish in the deep waters asking for forgiveness for the learned man. Like I can't think of anybody who hears that and doesn't think, I want that. So not only is knowledge prescribed to us as a mandate by our beloved Prophet ﷺ, and that seeking it is an obligation, but also it's such a beautiful thing to be a part of. I can't imagine anyone who wouldn't want to. So how do we make it a part of our lives? And how do we define it? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran, like, لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا. Like we don't have any knowledge except that what Allah teaches us. He says this in Surah Al-Baqarah. And so we have to first acknowledge that all knowledge comes from Allah. He is Al-Alim. He is the knowledge. Any knowledge comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we have to center Him when we're pursuing anything that we do in all forms. Because our mandate as Muslims is to seek knowledge. But achieving knowledge or having that knowledge, that's a gift from Allah. And we have to remember that in all that we pursue. And He says to us in Surah Al-Zumur, He says, هل يستوي الذين يعلمون والذين لا يعلمون? Like, are those who have knowledge and those who don't have knowledge, are they equal? And they're not. It's a rhetorical question because it's trying to get us to think about how much of an honor and a high rank it is to be of the people who have knowledge. And so that is something that we are constantly striving to become. We are constantly pursuing, and how and whether we may achieve it is a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I started by saying, like, my full-time job is to give and to take knowledge, to constantly research and learn from others, to teach others. I mean, people think of a college professor and they think of teaching. Oh, you're teaching. Oh, you're not teaching, so you're off. That's not usually how it works. The majority of full-time college professors, teaching is probably a third of their job. And the other part of their job is the research and writing, and then all of the service they do and work on campus to just keep things going. But the research and writing, it's a grilling process. Like, you are constantly trying to produce things. You send it out for review. You're workshopping things. You're constantly getting critiqued. So in a way, I appreciate it because they talk a lot within higher education in the US about something called imposter syndrome, which is common, and you see it most common in universities that are perceived or historically have been perceived as elite. And I say historically because I don't know how we can really define elite anymore these days. But in those spaces, imposter knowledge is something that is commonly talked about. And what it means is people just don't feel that they're good enough. They don't feel that they have what it takes. They don't feel that they're qualified to do what they're asked to do. They feel that everybody around them is better than them. And this is such a common thing in higher education amongst faculty, amongst graduate students, amongst even undergrads, that there'll be workshops regularly that universities put on to help people through that, because it can take away, it can weigh heavily on the self. And so that's something that's present in higher education. And I actually really appreciate the humility that American academia puts in a person, even though it can shift too far to the other end of the spectrum where it can debilitate one, and in that sense it becomes unhealthy, and you're not able to move forward. But there is a really humbling level, a humbling nature to being a professor that I appreciate, because I think that that's so important in any student or person who's continuously trying to pursue knowledge, because with the pursuit of knowledge can easily come arrogance, and we see that as well, and we'll talk a bit about that too. So our job is to seek the knowledge, and it's a mandate for everybody. Whether we get it, that comes from Allah. And one, of course, of the most beautiful ad'iyah that we have in the Quran, that the Prophet ﷺ was commanded by Allah to make, is to pray for that. وَقُلْ رَبِّ زِدْنِي عِلْمًا. And that dua came in a really, special verse where it was talking about the revelation of the Quran, and it was telling the Prophet ﷺ not to share or recite the revelation of the Quran until he had received all of it. So it's kind of slowing him down a little bit, and then it tells him in وَقُلْ رَبِّ زِدْنِي عِلْمًا, like recognize that the knowledge comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and don't, even though he was rushing to do something beautiful. So it's not always about, not all knowledge is necessarily needs to be said at every single moment. There's wisdom to how and when we share it. And also, not all knowledge is of equal value. And we know this because there's a hadith where we're taught, Allahumma zidni ilman nafi'an wa la tu'allimni bima la yanfa. Oh Allah, like increase me in knowledge that is beneficial, and do not give me knowledge that is not beneficial, because there is plenty of that going around, where people can attain what they perceive to be knowledge, but it actually is of no benefit and no good for them. So we have to be making dua for that all of the time as we're seeking knowledge. Oh Allah, increase me in knowledge. Oh Allah, increase me in beneficial knowledge. Oh Allah, protect me from knowledge that is not beneficial. And I see this again, I draw back, like on my field. In higher ed, we're constantly doing research, we're constantly conducting studies. It's not uncommon when you sit and look at a study, especially like large studies, that are based on assumptions, because you can't factor for every single thing possible that needs to be factored for to understand things. You're going to have to make some assumptions in the process. You're going to have to say or accept some limitations in the process. I can't really survey every single woman out there when I'm trying to tell you what's going on with women. So what is the process through which I can develop a system or an approach to surveying or understanding so that I can reflect as best as possible, given that I can't possibly ask every single woman. I can't possibly ask every single Muslim in America what they think about this. So how do we then construct the study that we're doing and explain the different limitations that we have and the different assumptions we've put in place so that we can move the study forward? That's part of all of academia. And this is where people, in my specific field in anthropology, push back against this idea of objectivity. They tell you that there's no such thing as objectivity, because what you decide to study, how you decide to study it, how you decide to bound that, is informed by who you are, what your interests are, what your purpose is with that study. That's always there in academia, and I teach my students, I want you to know how to peel back the onion, peel back all the layers when you're reading something before you start reading it, to understand how to digest what it is you're consuming. Because if you can't think through all those things, then you're just gonna read things and be receive it only in the way that they want you to receive it, without understanding all the other perspectives that are absent. There's knowledge in the silence sometimes. So this is really important to keep in mind when you're thinking about like how knowledge is produced. What are the assumptions? What are the limitations? This is in academia. And so I sit there and I look at some studies often and I'm thinking, why are we studying this? What's the purpose of it? And in the higher ed system in the United States, there doesn't always necessarily need to be like a moral or a good purpose. It is perfectly okay to study for the sake of studying. Now, there's also emphasis that things should have a benefit. A lot of foundations and grants will emphasize what's the broader impact of the work that you're doing. But broader impact isn't necessarily morality either, right? People, as we're seeing now, like what was good, it might not be good to tomorrow, and what's good today might be completely or may have been miserable in the past. I mean, how we develop these metrics of what's beneficial and what's not shifts with time. And I think as Muslims, one of the things that we should be ever so grateful for and say Alhamdulillah for is that we have a religion that can provide us a foundation and an anchor for how we think about what is good and what we want to pursue, which is something that, in a world without that, you really can be swinging left and right very widely. But back to the issue with like quote unquote knowledge within the like broader US higher education system, not all studies have real use, and a lot of them are biased. They're trying to prove something that they want to be proven, and so then you can read the data and read things in a way that send the message you want it to send, even though a completely different message could also be read from similar data. And it takes people who understand that knowledge has all these different levels to it to really peel back what they're reading and what they're learning and recognize the different forms of knowledge that could emerge from it. And then as Muslims, we ask, well, okay, why am I doing this? What's going to come out of this? And this is something that we need to be thinking about continuously. And back to the dua has to be front and center and at the root of, and like everything in between when we're trying to seek knowledge, because without that, like our intention could shift. Without that, we could end up losing track of what's the good or what's the purpose of what we're doing. So this dua of like Allahumma zidni ilman wa ilman nafi'an wa la tu'allimni bima la yanfa, like, oh Allah, give me knowledge, increase me in knowledge and knowledge that is good, and do not give me knowledge that is not good. I can't emphasize how important it is that all of us center that. And when we're pursuing knowledge, which, as I emphasized in the beginning, is an obligation on every Muslim, the Prophet ﷺ taught us that we must all seek knowledge. So the other thing that I wanted to talk about, I took this course with Sheikh Muhammad al-Masri here in Michigan a couple of years ago on Imam al-Ghazali rahimahullah's final book that he wrote, Bidayat al-Hidayah, the beginning of guidance. And we learned a bit about Imam al-Ghazali. So I wanted to share with us, as I kind of close off my thoughts in this final portion, a little bit about Imam al-Ghazali, because when we think about knowledge in Islam and we think about scholars who knew a lot, like I don't know anybody who can't attribute deep knowledge to Imam al-Ghazali rahimahullah, like not just in what people think of in terms of Islamic knowledge, which is colloquially how we use that word ulama, like those who have knowledge. We think of Islam, we think of knowledge in Islam. But Imam al-Ghazali rahimahullah, he didn't see Islam as just like Islamic studies and theology and jurisprudence and fiqh. He saw Islam in all different types of fields, and he was a scholar of all different areas. And of course, philosophy was a very popular one that he was known for, or one that he was popularly known for. So Imam al-Ghazali, he was, subhanAllah, he was born in 1059, passed away in 1111, just 55 years old. He was born in Iran, and he traveled to Baghdad later on to pursue knowledge. So some people think he's Iraqi, he's not, but but he traveled for his knowledge. His dad was illiterate, was a tailor, and that's where his name comes from. But his dad loved knowledge and wanted it for his sons, and bequested all of what was the little that he had that was left for his sons to continue pursuing knowledge. And Imam al-Ghazali, rahimahullah, he was just had such a capacity and ability to learn. It wasn't just him, it was him and his brother, but Imam al-Ghazali is the one whom we know today much more so than his brother, because of how talented and skilled he was in learning. He ended up leaving Iran because there wasn't enough there for him to learn from. He kind of outgrew the knowledge that he had access to there. And that's when he went to Baghdad. And this was a big thing for him to leave Iran at that time. And it's kind of Sheikh Masmari told us, it's a lesson, like don't hate something when it might be good for you, because that's what really brought him to fame. It's what helped him become known around the world. So he goes to Baghdad, and that at the time, Baghdad was like the hub of all classical ilm. Like most of the scholars at the time were connected to Baghdad. So being there was the place to be if you wanted to be a scholar. And Imam al-Ghazali was known by the age of 28, a very young age, as one of the greatest scholars in Baghdad. His scholarship was known, like I said earlier, philosophy, logic, theology, and fiqh and tazkiyah. And everybody really liked him. People looked to him to learn from him. He was the youngest professor to teach, and he took on the greatest position in their school system in Baghdad at that time by the age of 34. He attracted the most wealthy people to come and learn from him. He appealed to hearts and minds, and he was known as like a really great debater. People would just be afraid to enter into a back and forth with him because he was always going to win. It was kind of like, I mean, I'm sure we all have people that we know today within the world of media who are just very well known for debating. You don't want to get into a back and forth with them. But people were intimidated by Imam al-Ghazali rahimahullah. He was just known as the best alim, and he realized himself that he had been taken by the dunya. Subhanallah, like to be able to have that knowledge, like that ability to self analyze and to recognize when you yourself are becoming weak, that is such a mercy that comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it tells me that his intentions were good, even if he felt like he was becoming attached to the dunya and may have been becoming too close to arrogance in the process. The fact that Allah allowed him to recognize that is evidence of Allah's love for him and that his intentions were good. And it's one of the things, when you think about Surah Al-Takathur, we all know the surah. It's like one of the last surahs in the Quran. Alhaakum al-takathur hatta zurtum al-maqabir. Like you were distracted by excess until you see the graves. So this idea of being distracted by excess, when we used to read, when I read that surah, I think of like all the stuff in the dunya that's material, like wanting to gain so much money, wanting to gain wealth, wanting to have more of this, more clothes, more that. Like these are distractions. But you don't think of knowledge. You don't think of takathur and knowledge. But it could be like, why not? Like takathur is in excess when you're doing it and to a point where it's not about Allah anymore. Once you do anything where it's not about Allah anymore, you've entered into a place of excess. Now we're doing it in a way that doesn't give us the reward and it doesn't serve the purpose that we're put on earth for. So even something that's good can have takathur, right? So subhanallah. So in Imam Ghazali, the most brilliant alim of his time, and he had takathur in his knowledge, or at least he felt that. And going into his 40s, he felt like he lost his purpose. He lost his purpose in da'wah, and he recognized that he was a person of the dunya. And even his brother came to him to visit him, and he recited to him this beautiful poem. And he asks, in process, he asks him, what's your end goal? And he shakes Imam al-Ghazali rahimahullah, and he gives him this advice. And he tells him, and I'm quoting here what the Sheikh had taught us. He said, you have taken them by their extremities, wanting to change them, and then they began to hasten to change and left you behind. And you woke up to guide, not to be guided. And the information is shared and you're not listening. You're sharpening your knife, but you're unable to cut anything. And so that's like very powerful because again, like ilm is something we're obligated to pursue. And it comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but in that pursuit, we can lose track of why we're doing it. And even if we attain so much of it, if we lose track of what the purpose is, then it's no longer good for us. And this is where we talk about ilmin la yanfa, like knowledge that's not beneficial. It's not just in terms of like, oh, you don't need to know that. It's actually not a good thing. If we do that study, the outcome of it isn't going to help anyone. Like that's a clear ilmin la yanfa. But also, if you know too much, maybe it's not good for you. Maybe what it's going to do for your soul, right, can harm you in ways that are way worse than if you know a little bit less. So these du'as are layered, and we make them and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to always to guide us and keep our intentions pure. So of course, Imam al-Ghazali, as we know, he goes into this what they call depression, but it's really isolation. Like he just retreats, and weeks pass. He can't eat, he can't sleep. He's like trying to hold himself accountable. He's looking for solutions. Like there's months of this, and then he decides like I need to travel, and he starts traveling. and he just, they say, for like I think 10 years he disappears really in himself. In the process, begins with Hajj, and then he goes for 10 years, he's just avoiding people, he's searching for himself. And again, ilmin, Allahumma zidni, and this is ilm. He's pursuing ilm. He's 10 years by himself, but this is a whole different kind of ilm. It's not facts from scholars and from teachers. This is him trying to understand, okay, I have all these facts. I have all this like hard concrete knowledge, but then what's my purpose with it? How do I know myself? Right? So it's not just knowledge of the dunya and of the world and of the deen, but knowledge of the self that we learn from Imam Ghazali that you have to pursue. How do we know ourselves to be able to identify that we are doing things for the purpose we want to be doing them for? Where are we strong? Where are we weak? And really, no one can know us but us. And we need to give ourselves the time to ask ourselves hard questions and consider hard answers about ourselves. What really are our weaknesses? What are our strengths? So Imam Ghazali set on this path, and he really tried to humble himself. He would like clean up after people. He would clean masajid. Like he would make dua consistently to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to teach him the khair. He was just trying to find himself. And he had given away all of his wealth that he had before this. And he refused the spotlight. Like there were stories where people would discover who he was and then come and start to ask him questions and want to, again, be at his like kind of his students sitting by him, knowing who he was. And as soon as he would be discovered, he would retreat, and the next day, and he would be gone. And this book that I studied was The Beginning of Guidance. This was the last book that he wrote. The Beginning of Guidance ended up being the last book, subhanAllah, that he wrote. And one of the sections in the book, and it's a very beautiful book of like just how to live life as a Muslim, subhanAllah. I recommend it for everybody. But one of the sections in there that I want to close this out with is the section on riyat, which, and on pride and arrogance, which so riyat is a form of arrogance, and it's the minor shirk, Imam al-Ghazali calls it, which is like the small form of associating things with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it's the one he said he feared the most for his ummah, because it's about seeking pleasure from something other than God, which we're all guilty of. Like we all do things and we forget that, okay, to center Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and there ends up being another reason why we're pursuing it. And it's all about just being thoughtful. Like that happens because we didn't take a moment and just connect it. Like, how is this for Allah? And we all do it. But if we remember to take that moment and we're trying to pursue good things, then usually you can always connect it back to Allah, even if it's not like going on a run. It doesn't necessarily naturally come to people as being connected to Allah, but for sure you could connect maintaining your health to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what you do while you're on the run, what you think about, the intentions that you have. You're going to smile at people that you encounter on the street. All of these things are ways to connect it back to a good intention where the reward is from Allah. So the Imam al-Ghazali says that the minor shirk, or this small form of associating things with Allah, is what he fears the most for his ummah. He fears that we take pleasure from things that are not Allah, because Allah will reject anything that we do that we don't do for him. And Allah will then punish the people who do things to just show off so that they can be known as the people who do things. So, may Allah protect us from that, being the hypocrites. So being concerned with other people's attention, other people's admiration, other people's respect, which we all are. Like, I mean, I don't know. I've been giving this talk, preparing for it. I'm like, okay, inshallah, I don't say anything that offends anybody, bothers anybody, that people gain from, right? And so this is all, we're all feeling it. I'm feeling it. We're thinking it. And so then how do I return it back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and hopefully connect everything that I've said, that it's for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so I can achieve the reward and not be looking for anybody to say anything about me or it to be about my pride. And I wanted to bring pride into the conversation, and arrogance into the conversation, because he defines arrogance as the person who, upon receiving advice, is very aggressive, and upon giving it is also very aggressive. And the reason I wanted to bring attention to that is because this is something, especially in the age of social media, that I really fear. It's so easy when we're debating and having conversations back and forth, which in part I think is a form of ilm. Like in having these conversations, I've learned a lot in social media. I will post something or read something, engage somebody, and it will give me different perspectives to think about, allow me to understand things from positions that I haven't had, or people's needs that I wouldn't have otherwise considered, or learn something that I didn't know. So I think there can be really excellent things and it can be really beautiful. At the same time, the energy with which it's becoming normal to like want to be right, to want to have the closing comment, to go back and forth with people, it's aggressive. And so when I think about how he defines like the arrogant person, people who are aggressive and how they share what they're saying, even like people I think some of our community would identify as scholars, I read and I'm like, but why do we have to say it that way? It's aggressive. And so if you're saying it aggressively, and then if you also receive aggressively when people say back, this is what he defined as arrogance. May Allah protect us from it. And and so this is something that I think we all like in pursuing knowledge. For me, the whole point of pursuing knowledge, like I mentioned earlier in academia, they force this on you, the humility, but that's really part of it because as you pursue knowledge, if you know that al-ilm is with Allah, which He tells us, ilm comes from Allah, the pursuit is what we have control over. In that process, you are constantly humbled. All I do when I try to learn is learn how much I still have to learn and how little I actually know. So the actual pursuit of knowledge is a shield against arrogance. It's a shield against pride if it's done truly and with good intention because there is so much out there. And then the prayer to ensure that what we are pursuing is on the path towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and not ilm la yanfa, not knowledge that has no benefit because that's also out there and we might not be able to recognize it ourselves. And so my time is coming, so I'm gonna conclude with a small dua with the beautiful words of the Prophet ﷺ, because he taught us when a person dies, all their deeds except three die with them: the charity, the ongoing charity, the beneficial knowledge that they've left here, and the righteous child who prays for them. So leaving beneficial knowledge behind is also a gift that Allah would bless us with, that we can continue to reap reward. So I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants us all the ability to seek knowledge that is beneficial, to implement it in our lives, and to spread the knowledge around to others while we're here, and that it leaves remnants for when we depart that continues to give us reward. Jazakumullah khairan.
I mean, Jazakallah khair for the time, for the preparation, for the effort, for sharing the words of benefit. And you mentioned many good points. It's hard for me to, select one to to start with. MashaAllah, may Allah accept the time and the effort from you, and also God bless your family for, at times allowing you the time to prepare. MashaAllah, it's a family affair, much more often than not. But one thing that comes to mind, you mentioned um, the differentiation between beneficial knowledge and then on the other side of things, knowledge that may not be beneficial. I find it fascinating how there may be the knowledge itself in some cases may be beneficial knowledge, but then how do we interact with it? Like the knowledge is beneficial, but is it benefiting me? Am I allowing it to benefit me? And you mentioned this, behemoth of a of a figure in Imam al-Ghazali, especially when it comes to this idea of sincerity being connected with knowledge. Because he himself, I mean, I think one of the reasons why uh, some people teach their own, that's fine. But sometimes I wonder if some people may avoid the works of Imam al-Ghazali because there are times when he'll say things that are so pointed. It's like really, especially towards people of knowledge, towards, that class of scholars of ulama, and he'll say something very bluntly and in a very pointed way. But then he'll also mention, I know this because I used to be there. I know this because I used to be like that. And the cure to that, the antidote to that is this and this and this. So, he dishes out a lot of medicine, mashallah. And it's kind of up to the person who's either reading or listening to take the time to reflect on it and to benefit from it. And his example is very powerful when you look at, because there are two main portions, there are two main chapters in his life story, right? There's the before and then there's the after. And the biggest difference, that he'll highlight himself is just really digging deeply within himself, reflecting I mean, you said 10 years. That's a long time. It's not a few minutes,
Mm-mm.
right? Just to really reflect deeply. Why am I doing this? Why am I learning this? What am I doing with it? And then, the fruit that came from that, the Ihya Ulumuddin, the so on and so forth. And you mentioned a wonderful book, The Beginning of Guidance. Hopefully we can all benefit from it time and time again. It just, I mean, that's one of the main thoughts that comes to mind initially is there's the knowledge may very well be beneficial, but am I allowing it to benefit me? And then there may be the other, you mentioned the example of going for a run. Someone may see something that in and of itself may not be automatically perceived as being something that can spark beneficial reflection. But when a person does have eyes of sincerity, when they have eyes of Iman, then when they see something, they may be at the beach and they see some waves. All of a sudden, it may remind them of something that's connected to Allah and His Messenger. So it's amazing that there's the external factor of knowledge, maybe being beneficial or maybe not so much, but then how do I interact with it? How do I allow it to interact with me?
Mhm.
Um, SubhanAllah. I mean, this is one of many points, but if you have any further thoughts on that, I think we'd all be happy to hear any of your reflections, especially in connection with this idea of beneficial knowledge, and then maybe knowledge that's not so beneficial.
I mean, there's this story from Imam al-Ghazali when he was traveling. All his stuff was stolen from him, like all of his few things that he had remaining, and a book that he had all of his notes in. And he went after the people who robbed him because he wanted his book. And he encountered the kind of leader of the group and told them, like, can I have my book back? And the man asked, what's in it? And he told him, ilmi, like my knowledge. And the
Mhm.
man told him that this is not ilm if it's in a book. Ilm is what's in your mind. And after that point, Imam al-Ghazali intentionally stopped writing things and decided to retain all of his knowledge, and he would write later from mind, like not as a note, not as note taking, but to just document what he already knew. And as somebody who relies heavily on her notes, I always struggle with this because I'm a very huge note taker, and I will forget things. But I think to your point with the wave, what's connecting this is that it's very common that we'll see even this, like I'm seeing some of these people in this room, mashallah, like they're people that I could learn from and they're my teachers in many ways, and on our talk today. And I'm like, why are they here listening to me talk about knowledge? And this is exactly the reminder that we need. Like you go to the beach, you see a wave, and it reminds you of something. When we go to a talk, we might think, oh, what are they going to say that's new? I've probably heard it before. And you might have. They might not actually say anything that you've not heard before. But the way that it stays with you can be different. What you interpret from hearing it again, or an idea that comes to you that you retain, can be different. And that's your ilm, what you've retained, right? Like what you're able to take and then later share and later spread or later implement in your life in a new way, even if it's something you already read. Like when I shared earlier about Alhaakum Takathur, I've been thinking about that verse all Ramadan. Any of my friends will tell you, Nancy has been talking about that verse nonstop. It's just, I don't know why, subhanAllah, I read it or heard it recently, and then it just kept playing in my mind over and over, and I'm observing it in so many different new ways and thinking about it in deeper ways than I had before, even though it's a verse I've known since I was a child, right? And many of us learn that surah as little kids. It's one of the first ones you learn. So going in pursuit of things and allowing yourself and knowing that you, even if it's something you can learn more, that you can retain it differently, that you can um, be able to implement it in new ways, even if it's a familiar topic, I think is part of the being humble and part of the being open to ilm nafa. So to your point about like where you can find knowledge and how it comes in many forms, I think that's definitely a part of it, because the goal is to have it be in us, the way that Imam
Mm,
Ghazali then realized, okay, I need it in me. And the multiple encounters you have with it allow it to stick with you in so many different ways and for longer periods. So that's another thing I think is important to emphasize for a reminder for myself and everybody here, inshallah.
mm. Yeah, jazakumullah khair. Plus, I think when it comes to attending a talk, it could be on whichever topic, uh, so much of our deen is repetition by design. Like just because I've heard a lecture on a certain figure or a certain topic, or maybe in connection with a certain surah, a certain ayah, a certain book, just because I've connected with it before doesn't mean I shouldn't connect with it again. It's okay for there to be that repetition. I mean, when you look at the Quran, the idea of having a fruitful connection with the Quran, and I say this knowing that we're in the month of Quran, um, the idea is, and this is embedded in our tradition for centuries upon centuries, there's this beautiful practice that if someone finishes a khatam, if they finish reading the Quran, listening to the Quran, basically from beginning to end, from Fatiha to Nas, there's this idea that don't stop at Nas. Like when you finish Surah An-Nas, go back to Surah Fatiha and the first five ayahs of Surah Al-Baqarah, because it doesn't stop. It's not supposed to stop. By definition, it's supposed to continue. And what I find so beautiful when it comes to Quran, especially any beneficial knowledge, but especially Quran, it may be the same rote book, it may be the same words, but my life today is not the same as it was yesterday or a week ago or a year ago or 10 years ago. And maybe that reminder is what I actually need that day. I mean, if you think of our physical diets, I don't want to eat rice anymore. I've eaten it before. Like, okay, I don't want to eat chicken before again, I've eaten it before. Usually there's, especially if we like something, there's some kind of, if we like something and if it's nutritional, beneficial, good for us, then we'll often revisit that meal time and time again. And that's okay. Actually, it may be celebratory. My favorite cake is this. My favorite fruit is this. So when Eid comes, I'm having a whole bunch of whatever. It could be mangoes, it could be red velvet cake. It doesn't matter what it is. But I think this idea of I only want to go to a talk or take a class if it's new and I don't want anything to be repeated is like, hold on, you're missing the forest for the trees. If someone has an open heart, if they have an open mind and they're genuinely looking to benefit, they will benefit. But if not, then they won't. But like it's a lot of the time I think that simple. And when Allah mentions in the Quran, I know it's a very heavy ayah, but the concept is supposed to make us think very deeply internally. When Allah says, أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنَ أَمْ عَلَى قُلُوبٍ أَقْفَالُهَا. Allah connects this practice of tadabbur, of reflecting deeply on the Quran. It's directly connected with having an unlocked heart. That requires humility.
Mhm.
I mean, one of my this is one, you know how you mentioned like al-hakum takathur has been looping, but in a good way,
Yeah.
where it's like it's coming up again and again in different settings, in different ways. One small snippet that it sticks with me and it continues to circulate is when he's mentioned it more than once. Imam Sohaib Webb, he mentioned that one of his, I'm trying to remember the details, that I think his teacher from Senegal learned a lot from his older sister.
Mm.
And I forget if he mentioned or if she mentioned, could have been both, that every time they sit with Surah Fatiha, they always benefit and gain something new. I mean, to me, that's like, like, wait, what? And then it's amazing, like little by little, there ends up being a little opening here, a little opening there, especially when it's in connection with something in real life
Hmm.
I think that
Oh, I don't know if you froze
if
for. Oh, are you frozen just for me?
you were to continue,
You're back.
and if I just didn't say anything for the rest of the window of time, and if you just commented on Imam al-Ghazali, is it frozen?
Oh, I think you're back.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. You were frozen for a little bit.
Maybe it's because my okay. I need to unfreeze. I need, maybe I've just been hearing the Frozen theme song too much because of my kids. I may blame it on them, but then as the parent, it's like I kind of like this part. I don't know how my connection is, but I want to ask if you can share any thoughts if somebody wants to maybe unlock their heart, or hopefully the assumption is for everyone here that inshallah all of our hearts are unlocked. And if there's one heart that needs work, then let me work on myself. So let's assume someone's heart is unlocked and they want to keep it that way. What would you recommend? How can they do that?
Um, so there was a verse I recited earlier. Well, I didn't recite, but I referenced earlier from Surah Al-Zumar, and it was قل هل يستوي الذين يعلمون والذين لا يعلمون, and it continues إنما يتذكر أولو الألباب. And so this, are they equal, those who know and those who don't know? Verily, like the remembrance is with ulil albab. And I was trying to figure out how to define ulul albab. Like we read that phrase is in the Quran several times, and like who are ulul albab? It's and the more I read about it, it felt to me like it's people who've somehow been able to, in their relationship like with Allah and in their trying to solidify and pursuing that and solidifying that, they've managed to find harmony between their heart and mind, between like what you feel and loving Allah and what being loyal and serving Him, but also like in how you think about and know and are able to share and like kind of the wisdom that you have. So it combines. I feel like when I read about the how people explain ulul albab, that's what I feel. And so when it talks about um, the knowledge, they're not comparable, those who know and those who don't know, and it's asking and it's saying like the people of remembrance who know, the people who know the answer are ulul albab, like, and this happens, subhanallah, like, may Allah make us all of them. May Allah make us all ulul albab. They have a high status. But when you're encountering things, to be able to recognize knowledge that isn't beneficial for you, or that you yourself had knowledge that was misconstrued or were misinformed. I'm sure we've all had those moments. um, or you learn something from a perspective that you didn't think about. This happens to me a lot on campus in the context of dealing with accessibility for different types of students, because I don't know all the disabilities that exist in the world. And as much as in my heart, I would love to make my classroom accessible to every single person, I'm 100% sure that I'm unable to do that. Different people they learn in different ways. Some people prefer to see, some prefer to hear, some prefer stories, some prefer examples, some prefer just facts, some prefer their heart to be touched, some prefer just, concrete knowledge in their mind, in addition to all the physical things that people may deal with. Some may not be able to see well or be able to hear well, or et cetera, et cetera. Just being able to enter rooms, comfortably, and being able to sit properly can be different for different people. And so, in thinking about like accessibility and adding on to it, because there's a surge of mental health issues on college campuses amongst our students, may Allah heal everybody. The different things that are invisible, like inaccessible things that are invisible to me as an instructor. I don't know that that person is dealing with anxiety or with ADHD or with depression or even autism. I mean, not all students share necessarily if they. So there's all the spectrum of things that can impact students' ability to learn. And it really does humble me, because I have to think about when I'm putting in rules, when I'm putting in guidelines, to make sure that they've learned. You want to examine, you want to test, you want them to write, you want to do. How do I do that in a way that pushes people so that they're becoming better versions of themselves and doing the work and walking away from the class with knowledge, and at the same time recognizes that not all people can and should be pushed the same way, and creates space and is able to assist everybody so they have equal access to the material, but is still seen as fair and equitable to everybody. That's really hard. Like, it's something we talk about all the time as professors, and it doesn't have an easy solution at all. In the humanities, where my department is right now, there's a lot of pushback against AI, or artificial intelligence. There has been since it came out, and it's not really waning as fast as I expected it to. Very different than, for example, if you go to other fields where they've kind of accepted AI as a tool and are using it to enhance the teaching that they're doing. Within the humanities, it's very much like, how do we prohibit it? How do we say it's not allowed? We want students to read and have the experience of reading, and to think about what they're reading, and to write about it on their own, and to not rely on some artificial intelligence to, facilitate that process for them. And that's really important for some humanities professors. Excuse me. So how do you then, and full disclosure, I'm less I'm less occupied with that. I've kind of accepted that that's a tool out there, and I'm trying to um, allow students to use it and at the same time be able to teach them what I want them to learn. So I've been using multimedia in my courses more, and more things in class in ways that other people that I hope are accessible to everybody, so that I can get them to engage the material without only or strictly relying on AI, and recognizing that that's going to be a part of their process, and in the part that it is present, it can enhance, inshallah. But many of my colleagues, and I don't blame them, do not want AI in their classrooms. They want students to write. They want them to write well. They don't want that to be, a skill that's gone or ancient and or dying in our world. So then, in putting in boundaries around that, you really end up coming up against accessibility. Like, okay, because some of them said, all right, we're going to go back to blue books, and students have to handwrite their exams in class. And I can't read my own writing. I'm not going to try to read like 40 students. So this is not going to happen, guys. I can't do that. I'm sorry. But some of them are doing that. So they're, so the point, but then that leaves people out. Not everybody can write. I mean, in the same way, so this generation, many of them cannot write. Like, they were not taught to write. And also writing is a physical thing that can, if you don't do it regularly, can actually hurt people. Students complain of the pain from writing if they have to write large amounts. It does actually hurt. It's a muscle. Like, if you don't do it regularly, suddenly you have to write for 2 hours to fill an exam, or even 90 minutes, or whatever the amount of time, that can hurt you. And the ability to, like, use your hands is a blessing and a gift that not everybody has in the same way. So you end up coming, encountering these things. And this is, like, again, a humbling moment, right? Like, how do we recognize that we can only know so much, that it's important that we learn from everybody? And this was something Imam al-Ghazali emphasized. Like, you can learn from the kafir, even, he said, like the one who doesn't believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's everybody you can learn something from, even if you're just learning how to explain your Islam. Like, it might not be that I'm learning from him about Allah because he doesn't believe in Allah. But you might learn from him, okay, well, I'm trying to explain it, and this isn't working, or he spoke back with this argument. So now I know, it strengthens me to understand how to explain what I'm trying to explain better, right? So you can learn from anyone, and how you learn and how you teach needs to be kind of flexible, and understanding the so many different ways that can happen and that can be impaired, and how to accommodate for that is also, I think, a continuously humbling process. So that's the other thing that, and I think I'll close this with, is to allow ourselves to be open to the fact that we might not know, that the way that we know might be completely foreign to other people, that different people learn in different ways, and that, like, continuously seeking and understanding that has to be a part of our process. Again, like, we're responsible for seeking knowledge, but the knowledge itself, the ilm, that's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He gives who he wants, and he keeps what he wants.
Yeah, and I really appreciate the element that you highlighted of people having different learning styles. Some are more visual, some prefer auditory, some prefer kinesthetic, right? Feeling things. Some people prefer reading, some people, and what's interesting, I'm connecting some dots that you mentioned here. When the Prophet mentioned, alayhi salatu wasalam, that it's fard, it's mandatory for every Muslim to seek knowledge. Now that, you mentioned both of these ideas in the same window of time, it's interesting that the Prophet left it open. He didn't say it has to be through reading and writing. It has to be by way only of sitting at the feet of your teacher or serving them, so on and so forth. He left it open. And there are going to be different people who have different preferences. And I think it's important. It's slowly starting to happen more. I think it's important for that to be approached with validation, that it's okay if someone finds it easier to connect with the Quran through listening, and then someone else that may be reading. Someone may have a lot of, commute time, and they figured that, hey, I might as well listen to Quran during this time. And maybe they have a newborn at home and they don't have the luxury of sitting down even for 10 minutes and reading something. That's okay. Different people are going to learn in different ways. The same person may learn in a variety of different ways. And I think it's important for there to be this notion of encouragement. One of my favorite hadith from the Prophet ﷺ is when he mentioned يَسِّرَ وَلَا تُعَسِّرَ بَشِّرَ وَلَا تُنَفِّرَ. To make things easy, don't make things difficult. Encourage people, don't discourage them, or don't cause them to flee from you. A lot of that has to do with the character, the attitude. How is this person being taught? How are they being reminded of something, of anything? And I think there's room for a lot of different avenues, because the end goal is the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The end goal, we're all trying to make it home to Jannah. We all want to benefit from from the knowledge that comes our way, the beneficial knowledge that does. Is typically a very busy time for a lot of people. So thank you for carving out this time for Ihsan Foundation for West Africa. You mentioned the hadith of Sadaqah Jariyah, of leaving these three things behind. All three can be done through Ihsan Foundation's projects, right? If you support students going to school where they learn both secular and sacred subjects, so they're learning math and science as well as Quran and Sirah, for example. So if those kids knowledge behind, and there's the ongoing charity aspect. So may Allah bless you, in terms of helping to facilitate and for all of this to happen, inshallah. Any closing words, remarks, anything that you want to plug? Is there a project that you're working on? Is there any last words that you want to mention before we conclude, inshallah?
Sure. I mean, I'll just address Chaplain Tahira in the comments is talking about Musa alayhi salam and his encounter with Al-Khidr. And I think that's such a beautiful reminder of what does it mean to be humble, because and for ourselves to connect what we're doing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by making it prophetic, like that when we're going to seek knowledge, from even when he's a prophet alayhi salatu salam, and he has so much knowledge, but he's going to seek knowledge, and he tries to stay quiet and tries to learn but can't control himself, like. And so in seeking knowledge from others and in resisting thinking we know when we don't know, we can intend to be prophetic. We can intend to be like Prophet Musa alayhi salatu salam, and that just allows us to gain that much more reward and keep what we're doing centered for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Like, I look forward to your talk on that, Tahir. I'm sure it's going to be great. And then I just closing remarks, just reminder for myself and everybody else, like, um, knowledge comes in all forms. It's what you learn from your child as you're raising them. It's what you learn in dealing with people. It's what you learn in a class that you take on any subject, whether it's art or whether it's history or science or religion. It's what you learn um, in talking to your elders and learning from their wisdom and from their life experience. And it's very easy to say, oh, they're older, they don't get it, but also they're older, they get a lot that the older I get, and I'm getting there, I realized that. Like, I realized there was a period where it's just like, oh, they're stuck in a old period of time. They don't understand today's world. and they were actually just 3 steps ahead of me. Like they understood, they were in the past and they're there today, and they understand what I'm doing right now, and they understand that I think I know and I really don't, and then later I'm going to understand that I thought I knew and I really knew nothing. And that's just the cycle of knowledge. So recognizing knowledge comes from all topics, sorry, and from so many different sources. Like Imam al-Ghazali rahimahullah even said, like from the kafir you can extract knowledge, and having the humility to allow yourself to receive it comes from that dua, comes from asking Allah to increase you in it, comes from intentionally desiring to seek it in everything that you do. And so that's the closing thing, is I pray for me, for myself, and for all of you, that we center that dua, that we ask Allah, Allahumma zidni ilman, Rabbi zidni ilman, Rabbi zidni ilman, in all that we're doing, and that we're centering the pursuit of knowledge, and that we're being humble enough to allow it to emerge from anything that we encounter, whether it's structured and formal or in the everyday. Jazakumullah khairan for your time. May Allah reward you and accept all of your fasting and dua and worship this month.
Ameen. Jazakumullah khair. Again, thank you for the time. May Allah bless you and yours always. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. السلام عليكم.
عليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.